All right, continuing with assignment 2. So last class, we worked a lot on this. So if I go to my courses, I open up this course section. Oops, it's going to make me sign in. Hopefully, you've already submitted your sketch for the assignment, right? No reason to not submit that as soon as you can. I've seen submissions from most of you. Just logging in here. So we have what we post to Canvas. That's what we show your teacher. That's what we show the rest of the class. You can always get to it, shortcut to it through the assignments link on the home page. Then we scroll down to assignment 2 and where we post it. And where we got by the end of last class was kind of rough placing things together. Warping, placing, rough cutting to get that whole body seamed together. So that's where we are. Make sure you at least post your sketch by 11:59 tonight, because that's the deadline. And remember, assignments, you can't get credit if you don't post anything before the deadline. All right. So looking at my creature here, I've got a lot of different layers. Now I want to start blending those rough placements. And to do that, just like with the landscape, I'm going to use direct adjustments. So I've got all the layers for the head are combined in this folder. Then I've got layers for the wings and the chest on their own. And then I've got layers for the back feet. And then I've got the tail. So I already have way more than 5. So what I'm going to do is start at the very top. This is the opposite of what we did for our landscape. The landscape, we started doing adjustments. We do levels, we do color balance, we do hue saturation. But I started from the furthest back layer. But for creature design, you want to focus at what is closest to the viewer first. And so I have this muzzle. So what do? I go to layer. We're going to use the same adjustment. Sorry, you don't go to layer. You go to image and you go to adjustments. You use the same adjustments each time in the same order. So first, levels. I'm just going to push it over here and use the mid-tone slider. And I'm going to decide. I hate when it does that. I'm going to undo it. Make sure you're on the layer you want to impact. So I'm going to uncheck auto select so it doesn't accidentally select a different layer. And go to image adjustment and you do levels first to adjust the lights and darks. So if I'm looking at this mouth, I use this mid-tone slider and I push it left and right. And it's not that I'm trying to get it to match this exactly. I'm trying to get it to where I think it looks best. Because then I'll make what's behind it match it, right? And you want something that's an idealized kind of figurative asset for this. You want everything to be as really clean, sharp in focus, and like fully lit, evenly lit, without any like super dark shadows, without any really bright highlights, because then we could put that figurative asset in any environment and make it match. So that looks pretty good for levels. Remember, you can always check your history and see what levels did. It was just a little bit of a darkening. Now I go to image adjustment, and color balance is the next one. This is the color temperature. I always start with midtones, but I can always change this later, but I'm just going for what I think looks good, because I don't really have anything to match it to yet exactly, except what I'm hoping the full project will be by the end. And I'm going to warm the highlights a little bit, especially that tongue, and then cool the shadows. So I think it's cool to have this open mouth for my creature. All right, now the last one, hue saturation. I'm just going to make a habit of playing with it, even though it's not always necessary, just to show you what it can do. You can push the hue forward or backwards. I might just push it a little bit forward. And then saturation, how intense do you want it? I actually got to take it down just a little bit. so the teeth don't look so yellow. Now, I'm not going to worry about those outside edges yet. Instead, I'm more worried about making these internal edges match. So my next layer is this eye, and then there's this eye. And because those eyes are very similar, I'm going to select both of them, and then I'm going to say Layer, Merge Layers, or Command E for short. So it puts both those eyes on the same layer, so I don't have to do this 2 different times. So I go to Adjustments, under Image, go to Levels, I play with the midtone. I'm going to darken them a little bit. Okay, next, I go to Image Adjustments, and I go to Color Balance. I'm going to play with the midtones. And I start from the bottom up here with the sliders. Do I want it more towards blue? Do I want it more towards yellow? Sometimes I'm surprised by what actually looks better. So that's why I want you to slide it both ways and then determine. And you never go too far or you start losing information. If I go too far this way, then it's replacing with red pixels that were other colors. And then I'm not able to get those other colors out. So I say about go 20% in either direction, but be wary about going further than that. But of course, you'll learn by doing. That's the whole point of a studio class. Okay, now the highlights, I'm going to warm them up a bit. Because they are the eyes. I do want them to stand out. And then the shadows, I'm going to cool down. Especially those cyans. Okay, now, with hue saturation, I get to make some decisions here. I can push the hue, and it seems to help to push it to the right rather than to the left. Come on. But just a little bit. And then I can play with how colorful it is. Now, because these eyes come from a lizard, they're going to be a lot more colorful than the fur around them. So if I want it to look more believable, I might have to take the saturation down a bit. And that's going to help everything blend. So it's like skin. When you shave away the fur, this is the skin that's underneath. All right. But if I want to keep the orange of the eyes really colorful, but the blue's not, I can actually target the hue saturation. This is where it gets really interesting. Where I can go to the reds and see where all the reds are, right? And then I can actually saturate those so they stay intense. But on the cyans, which is all that blue, I can actually take that down. And I can even, this is where you do play with light and dark. I can even play with just the cyans in it. And I can even change the color of those cyans. If I wanted them to match the cat, I can move them more into the warms, like the oranges, like that, and then play with that darkness, that saturation. But I want some of that color there, so I'm not going to replace the cyans that much. But you see how just color and lighting can do a lot. This is before we played with levels to help the layers match before you even blend the edges. So when I start erasing around and blending to get that nose to match, it's all going to work. Okay, what's underneath those eyes now? Oh, I have this thing, same thing. I'm just going to go right to levels. I'm going to be doing this a lot. Whoops. Didn't move to the right layer for me. There we go. That's why I have auto select off. Image adjustment, levels, midtone slider. Where do I want it? I probably want to limit the highlights a little bit, but other than that, it's pretty good. Image adjustment, color balance, give it warmth. A little bit more magenta. Midtones, let's see. I did see in the morning class people pushing the colors too far, and that can sometimes limit what you do next. These are all things to to experiment with and to play with. Okay. And now you can see the big difference that had from here to levels to color balance. And now hue saturation. And I just wanted the spikes, so I'm just going to blend that. So I'm not going to worry about cyan. I'm going to go to the master and just decide if I want it more saturated or less saturated. I'm actually going to make it just a tiny bit more saturated. Do I push it left or do I push it right? It looks like if I push it left a little, that works. Okay, next, now we get to the main head. And that fur. Start with levels. And now I want to make it match that nose. So I'm going to take it a little bit darker. Not much, but a little bit. I'm going to limit the highlights just a little bit. So it's kind of an even exposure, right? Then I'm going to go to color balance. And I'm going to play first with the midtones. Notice that it will remember where you left off. Push these back and forth. Decide what looks best. Then I go to the highlights. I'm going to warm it up. Then I'm going to go to the shadows, cool them down. Just like I did with the jaw. And now you can see that was before levels, that was after levels, this was after color balance. Sometimes it's a big move, sometimes it's subtle, but they should all work to bring them closer together. So the saturation, I'm looking at the fur, not the green. I'm going to up the saturation a little bit on that fur. Then the hue, I want to push it on the spectrum more towards the yellows or more towards the reds, maybe just a touch more towards the yellows. And then is there any targeted color? Maybe the blues, see if there are any blues in there. No, not really. So nope, that's, oh, I can play with the reds. I can target the reds. And maybe shift their hue a little bit so they're not quite so yellow. And then desaturate them a bit. Good. All right, so you can see from color balance to hue saturation. I'm not going to worry about trimming out that outside yet. I move back, and now I'm on the wings. So I need to make those wings kind of look like they're a similar lighting condition to this head, which is tricky because it's all in shadow. But I can get a little bit closer to it by using these adjustments. So first levels, mid-tone. Do I want to darken it or do I want to brighten it a little bit? I want to brighten it a little bit, but I don't want to lose that contrast, right? So that helps. And then I go image adjustment, color balance. And I get to decide, okay, let's see. In the midtones, do I want it to go more towards yellow? More towards the blues? I think more towards the blues, because this is the underside of the wing. More towards the cyans or more towards the reds? I think a little bit more towards the reds to kind of help with that fur color. More towards the magentas or more towards the greens? Definitely, if anything, towards the magentas. Now I go to the highlights, add some of that warmth back in. A little bit more towards magenta, and in the shadows, let's see if I can push it to it going blue without going purple or green. Yeah, I think that works. Okay, so you can see that difference from this to this. It was really dark before, levels, color balance, and now hue saturation. The only way to get good at this is to just do it a lot. When I was in college, actually as a freshman in college, and then the summer after my freshman year, I got a job at a copy place. This was in the late 90s, and they had just introduced kind of mass color photocopies. That was new in the late 90s. But you had to hand adjust the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks. to optimize them. So